Okay, great. My talk's a little different. I'm going to be talking about a book that I wrote. It's actually my first novel, Things Happen, and it's actually a magical working in itself. And Tom has little flyers for you. That's my husband, Carl Abrahamson's publishing company, Trapar Books, so that you can become familiar with our books. Earlier this year, Trapar published my first novel, Things Happen, and I thought it was a perfect topic for this conference because it blends fact and fiction, taking real stories from my life and turning them into a narrative. But I used the cut-up method to create the book, so it's not a linear narrative in any way. The cut-up method, of course, developed by William Burroughs and Brian Geisen. And as I said, it's not just a creative tool or a literary technique, it's an actual magical process and a magical practice. And if you don't believe me, start using it yourself and see what happens. In my practice as a psychoanalyst, I feel a lot of my work at this point in time is consisting of helping people locate ingrained systems of belief inside themselves that they've inherited from their parents, families, society, to identify and interrogate those systems and cut them up in a way and break them down so that they can begin to move forward in a way in their lives that's more authentic to themselves rather than basically doing what's been expected. This process can be implemented through the psychoanalytic process, but it can also work through the creative arts and magical practices, of course. And the cut-up method is a way to do this. So I'm going to read from the book at the end of this talk, but I'm going to give you a little background first so that you're oriented to what you're hearing. I'm originally from Miami, Florida, and I moved to California in 2007 for my postdoc year after I got my doctorate in clinical psychology. Now, when I was growing up, I was living in Miami in the 80s and 90s. And at that time, Pablo Escobar was still around, and Miami was the main port for the import and distribution for cocaine in the United States and around the world. And when I moved to California and got kind of separated from my hometown, I started writing a lot and writing down a lot of the experiences I had had. Many movies and books have been made about this era, including Scarface, of course, the Cocaine Cowboy series, and a fantastic book called Hotel Scarface, which is about exactly a specific hotel, which was called the Mutiny. And the Mutiny has been described as the epicenter of all of this. This is the place where the heads of different cartels met to make deals with each other and with government agents, basically paying off local police and law enforcement and federal law enforcement so they could continue their business ventures. The Mutiny was recently featured in the streaming series Griselda, starring Sofia Vergara, and has an entire show dedicated to it, actually, Hotel Cocaine. And you'll see why this makes sense in a little bit. Both of these series were released earlier this year in 2024. So there's something about that era in the air right now. Needless to say, it was an interesting time and place to grow up. And all of this was happening not just in my city, but actually in my neighborhood. So the elementary school I went to from age 4 to 12 was located exactly across the street from this hotel, which has been described as the epicenter of this drug trade. And I was there at that school from 1981 to 1989. So we're like across the street playing kickball, and all of this is going on at this hotel. And then another layer of this is that Coconut Grove, where I grew up, in the 1960s was really a hippie haven. So like Timothy Leary came through town and dosed everyone, including my mom. John C. Lilly had a laboratory in Coconut Grove where he was doing his dolphin experiments, his telepathic dolphin experiments. Crosby, Stills, and Nash were local legends. And Jim Morrison's infamous concert where he pulled it out for his fans, that all happened in my neighborhood. And my mom was also at that show. Then we flash forward to 1992. When I was 15, there was this massive Category 5 hurricane, Hurricane Andrew. At the time, it was the largest, most destructive storm to ever hit the United States, with sustained winds as high as 165 miles per hour, which is 266 kilometers per hour, to give you an idea. It hit Miami dead on, and the day before I was at Lollapalooza having fun, and the next day my parents and I were in this harrowing storm. Hurricane Andrew not only destroyed Miami and my house that I grew up in, but also the Mutiny Hotel. And after that, when it was abandoned, I was 15, 16, we all hung out at this hotel at the time. We used to squat there. One of my friends at the time, not to cover my book, was my friend Jessica. And this is us at the Mutiny back then, 1993. She had run away from home and was living at the Mutiny full time. She pulled a mattress up to the 9th floor and called it Planet 9. She had long red hair, often, so we nicknamed her Sally, because The Nightmare Before Christmas had just come out. There was a local goth club nearby housed in an old independent cinema where they used to show the Rocky Horror Picture Show on weekends, and we hung out there whenever it was open. And then after the club would close at 4 or 5 a.m., we'd head back to Planet 9 to party and spend the night. All of this kind of gives you an idea of the set and setting for the book. Also of note, Marilyn Manson and the Spooky Kids were a local band in Miami at this time. So we used to see them play like every week. Fast forward to 2020. With all that was going on during 2020, different friends started passing away. I decided to revisit material that I'd written down when I first left Florida back in 2007. And then in early November, I received the terrible news that my dear friend Jessica had been killed. As you may recall, during COVID lockdowns, there was a rise in domestic violence, and unfortunately, Jessica was killed by her ex-boyfriend that she was in the process of moving out of their apartment. He shot her in the back and then turned the gun on himself, so he's also dead. Obviously, Jessica's death was a real shock, and I found myself processing my grief by delving into art and making these portraits of her. I created a whole series of them and then started making portraits in general using collage and using cut-ups to kind of, give these people who had died new life and that they could say new things. So I'll show you a few more of those. And that's Lady J. Briar-Pjorge kind of leading Jessica into the underworld, I guess giving her a light. I also began writing again during this time, writing down more memories of those times and scenes. And then I also wrote down dreams and printed them out and started cutting them up and mixing them also together with cut-ups of my own psychoanalytic and academic writing. While I was engaged in this process, I would record myself reading from the cut-up text, and in these kinds of collages, I would actually read what the halos would say. And I met this British musician, not Pete Murphy from Bauhaus, just also named Pete Murphy, and he started setting my recordings of my cut-up texts to music, and he's made, actually, since 2020, 17 albums of them, because he's really into it. And then he would send me back these fantastic tracks, which are really in my style. And when I was working on the novel from 2020 to 2023, I would listen to the tracks that he would make and shuffle them. And then I started kind of weaving back in to the novel phrases that I would hear in the songs, because he would cut up my words and put them together in new ways. So it created this kind of awesome feedback loop. And I'm going to play one of these for you. It's about 2 minutes. She said, "Daddy, do you have a time for me?" "Daddy, do you have space for me?" "Daddy, do you have enough attention for me?" "Daddy, do you have the keys for me?" "Daddy, do you have something for me?" "Daddy, do you have anything for me?" Daddy, do you have blood for me? Daddy, do you have a story for me? Daddy, do you have change for me? Discipline, silence. Daddy, do you have details for me? Daddy, do you have someone else for me? Potential. Daddy, do you have pieces of the puzzle for me? Daddy, do you have a quarter for me? Daddy, do you have a dog for me? Daddy, do you have a shred for me? Daddy, do you have an ending for me? What is it, Father? And these are the three, you can see I film my own collages sometimes when I make films for these songs. And so these are the three collages. That's me and Jessica at the club. And this is one I made of Jessica in her casket, but I would never post it online, but I could show it here for you all as I put it in the film. And then this is the one that ended up being the cover, wraparound cover for the book, Things Happen. All scenes from back in the day. And I feel like using the cut-up method to create the book really invokes a sensation in the reader of kind of what it was like to live during that time, because you go from scene to scene, and then you get kind of cut off and thrown into another scene, and then the other scene from before comes back around, and you kind of have to make sense of things. So I really like the effect that it gave. And of course, there's another layer to the book that is called Things Happen itself. If you're familiar with Coil, Things Happen is a Coil song that had vocals by Little Annie, also known as Annie Anxiety. And this has been like my favorite song since I was a teenager. And Jessica and I used to always talk about getting it tattooed together. And we never got the tattoos, but now we have this book. And actually, when you've read the book, the lyrics of the song are interwoven in the book as well. So by the end of the book, you've also read the song. And there's another layer to that because I did get to meet Little Annie because, as you know, I'm married to Carl Abrahamson, and I moved from the U.S. from New York to Sweden. And when I was in that process, Carl actually met Little Annie at a Swans concert because she was opening for them. And I gave her my first book of cut-up poetry, Switching Mirrors. And it had turned out that Little Annie had just moved to Miami herself and didn't know anybody yet. So Carl ended up saying, like, well, when I visit my wife there, we should get together, because there was a period where I couldn't move to Sweden yet. I was waiting for my residency. So I spent a lot of time in Miami in between. And during that time, also, Little Annie and Jessica got to meet. We actually all went to a Jimmy Buffett concert, which is really random, but it's Florida, so that's what happens. So I did get some photos of them, and Annie did go to Jess's funeral, which Jess would have thought was infinitely cool. So yeah, so that's a bit of the background. And then I just want to read from the book for a little bit. I don't know how much time I have left, 8 minutes. This is my book, Switching Mirrors, my first book of cut-up poetry. 5 minutes? 8 minutes? Okay. You just cut me off if you need to, because I think the book speaks for itself. But if I just started reading it, you would be like, what the fuck is this? You know? Excuse me. All right. He shot her point blank in the back. Ivy exhaled smoke as she snubbed out her cigarette, then immediately searched her purse for another one. She pulled out a crumpled pack and peered inside, but it was empty. She looked up at him. Daddy, do you have another cigarette for me? Sure, doll. Victor picked up his silver cigarette case and flipped open the lid to offer her a clove. Ivy placed the Jarm Black between her full red lips as he pulled the Zippo lighter from his pocket. She leaned in, and as his thumb flicked the wheel, he cupped his hands around the flame to block the wind as she lit her cigarette. Ivy gazed up at him as she sucked on the end of the clove a few times until it was well lit. "Thanks," she said as she exhaled and turned away. "I find it difficult to look at anyone as I utter these words." They lived in the heart of Coconut Grove, a sunny place for shady people. For years, Ivy and Sally attended every goth and fetish party in the South Florida scene. I can still picture her sitting there. Sally sat cross-legged on the floor in the living room of Bobby and Desiree's apartment, where she was living at the time. She gazed at her reflection in the full-length mirror that was propped up against the wall as she styled her hair and makeup, readying herself to head out into the night. Her long red hair reached the floor, cascading in waves down her back. Sally carefully adorned her eyes with thick black lines in decorative shapes, reminiscent of ancient persons in millennia past. Depending on the venue, sometimes Ivy and Sally were the entertainment. They danced on stages, on bars, and in cages. They were always dancing. For years, Sally bartended at the Sink, their all-time favorite hangout. When she was dating DJ Nosferatu, they accompanied him to his gigs all over South Florida, from Miami to Fort Lauderdale and West Palm Beach. A lot of the same faces appeared again and again at the various parties. There was this one guy who attended each and every event without fail. He was always dressed in the same gear, a black leather Speedo and combat boots with his hands tied behind his back and a black blindfold over his eyes. He was super tan with bleach blonde hair and had that tough, leathery skin like he'd been left out in the sun for far too long. He had a kink for being a slave and was hungry for anyone to do anything to him. So they did. Ivy and Sally locked him in cages, tied him up in the women's bathroom, and encouraged other femmes to whip him, and wrote degrading statements all over his body with black Sharpie marker. Hurt me, feed me, spank me, do anything, drawing arrows to his various orifices. He was begging for it and loved every minute of it. One time they were at a smaller venue, and he was standing around not getting much attention. His blindfold was loose around his neck, and he just looked pathetic. He was eyeing Ivy and Sally as they sipped on their drink of choice, purple Long Island iced teas. The purple came from a topping of Chambord. So Ivy walked over to him. "I noticed you staring at us. What do you want?" "Feed me." "Feed you what?" "Anything you want." "Anything?" "Anything." Ivy already had a few Long Islands in her and came up with a great idea. She kept thinking blood was going to pool up inside of her and fill up all the inner cavities of her body, that she was going to drown in her own blood. There was a part of her that knew this didn't make any sense, but still she couldn't shake the feeling. Night after night they partied. Ivy was sure some of the people they hung out with were capable of committing a similar crime. Many friends died over the years from a variety of circumstances. Friends overdosed a few times, and ambulances were called to rush them to the hospital. One time, two friends who were near death spoke afterwards. It turned out they both had similar experiences while they were unconscious. They found themselves in a liminal realm where they were able to communicate with one another. There's a video of it, you know. Every time she drifted off to sleep, she awoke startled. She felt as if she couldn't breathe, like she had stopped breathing. It felt as if her heart had stopped beating for a moment. But that's impossible. Ivy had lived through a plethora of such experiences. Fortunately, she never had to witness death as it was occurring. At least not yet. Knock on wood. As she exhaled the cloud of smoke, Ivy tasted the clove on her lips. It reminded her of Sally and another time in their lives. At fetish parties, Ivy and Sally created special performances. They dressed up in various looks and danced on stage for all to admire. Just have one more paragraph. Ivy and Sally were usually hanging out with this girl Lucy as well. Her parents were hippies turned yuppies that apparently thought it was cute to name their daughter Lucinda Samantha Delano, so her initials spelled out LSD. That's true. I had that friend. Everyone called her Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds for obvious reasons, and as fate would have it, she always had acid on her. She was happy to dish it out to friends and acquaintances alike. If she met someone who'd never tripped before, she'd tell them to stick out their tongue, and without giving it a second thought, she'd tear off a perforated tab and stick it in their mouth. Most people had no idea what was in store. They all used to hang out on the 9th floor of an abandoned hotel called the Mutiny. That's good. I can stop there.
Thank you, Vanessa.
If you look right over there. Are you looking? I wish I could talk in Technicolor, or let you see. Did you say you can see it? It's, I can't tell you, son. If you can't see it, then you just never know it.